Radical Radio Collective.
Good afternoon, listeners. You're not heading for a Category 5, we're heading for a Category 2. But that was King Stingray with Cat 5. You're tuned into 4ZZZ 102.1 FM. This is Eco Radio, Australia's longest running peace and environment radio show. We're taking over your middle of the day, middle of the week, start of the month airwaves. My name's Dave. I'm here with Zack.
My pronouns are he, they.
My pronouns are he, him. And I want to start off by acknowledging and paying my respects to the custodians on the country in which we broadcast. We're located in the city Mungin on Turrbal Yugger Yugabal land. I also want to acknowledge and pay my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are listening in today. Our radio waves reach Cubby Cubby and Unibara country in the north, Waka Waka country in the west. In the east, we pay our respects to the Quandamooka people, and down south, we reach the Commonwealth, Ngarrawal, Manjali, Wanjerabara, and Yugambeh countries. Thank you for tuning in today. We're going to be, like everyone, I suppose, talking about the cyclone that is heading for southeast Queensland.
We are on the bandwagon.
Yep, I'm strapped into the bandwagon.
I feel like it pertains more to us, given we are like an environment show, and everyone else is kind of like infringing on our topics.
Yeah. Everyone else should stop talking about cyclones.
This is an exclusive. This is an Eco Radio exclusive.
It's in the name.
Jeez.
Eco.
Yeah.
We will be talking about the cyclone. We're going to be having an interview with Professor Steve Turton. He's an adjunct professor of environmental geography at Central Queensland University, and he's written a textbook, Surviving the Climate Crisis. He's also written in the conversation about cyclones recently. So we'll be talking to him, and Zack will bring us some information about wildlife.
Yeah, how cyclones affect wildlife, how I guess they just affect the environment in general, and how that can cascade onto the wildlife too. Yeah.
So that's all going to be super interesting. If you want to stick around for that, we would be greatly appreciated, because we are a community-run radio station, run for the community, by the community. And if you like what we do here, you can head to 4zzz.org.au/support and become a supporter. Subscribe for as little as $25 if you're under 18, or $40 if you're a concession. Full subscription is $80. If you really like what we do here, you can subscribe for $140 and get a t-shirt and tote to walk around town and
have that drip on you.
Yeah, be really drippy.
Get some stickers too. You can even put those on the tote bag if you wanted to.
You sure
can. T-shirt. I've got mine on the back of my laptop though.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's nice. We're going to be talking to Professor Steve Turton after this. You're listening to 4ZZZ. This is Eco Radio.
4ZZZ's Radio Reversal has gone digital. Since 2012, the collective have been building a record of radio theorising, organising, mistake-making, rethinking and community building that happens across this city. So, if 1 hour a week isn't enough for you, head to radioreversal.substack.com to learn more about the Radio Reversal podcast, or listen to the full episodes via your favourite podcasting app.
You are tuned into Eco Radio on 4ZZZ. My name is Zack. I've taken over from Dave for a bit, hence why we sound completely different from before the song break. Now, I'm going to be talking to you about some of the effects that cyclones can have on wildlife. But I guess first and foremost, I found something interesting about the etymology of hurricanes, which also prompted me into looking up where the word cyclone originates from. So hurricane is predominantly used in the Americas and kind of like Western Europe, and there was an Aztec god called Huracan, who was the god of wind. And that seems to be where the word hurricane is derived from. And then after that, with cyclone, I googled this morning prior to the show that cyclone is derived from the Greek word cyclos, which means to coil like a snake, which is certainly apt for what a cyclone does. It does spin and spin around. But now jumping into how wildlife is affected by cyclones and the environment in general, I suppose. So wind and waves can pretty heavily damage coral, and as we all know, coral is very, very important habitat for fish and a lot of other creatures underneath the sea that rely upon it. So every time that coral gets removed, there's less habitat for that fish, for certain species of fish, which is not great for them. And the wind and waves can also cause quite a fair bit of turbulence below the water. So the issue with that is that this can disrupt the sea floor. This then means that some of the sand gets displaced, and it just can shift the balance of the sea floor, especially with things like water, like coral and seagrass. And as we discussed last week, if there's sand or mud that can get on top of this coral and seagrass, they then can't photosynthesize appropriately, and it's possible that they will die off. Now, going back to how it can disrupt the seafloor, this can also remove beds of shellfish and remove beds of seagrass. And it can also result in the benthic fishes, which suffocating due to the sand kicking up and clogging their gills. I think what we're going to go to now is a song, so we will be back with you shortly.
You are tuned into 4ZZZ 102.1 FM. This is Eco Radio, and right now on the line we have Professor Steve Turton from Central Queensland University. Steve is a adjunct professor of environmental geography. Thank you very much for joining us today, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be with you.
So a lot of people are talking about the cyclone, obviously. That's how I found you. You wrote the textbook Surviving the Climate Crisis, the Australian Perspectives and Solutions, and you've also written about Cyclone Alfred in The Conversation this week. So what are we expecting to get with with Cyclone Alfred hitting southeast Queensland here?
I guess what I've been saying to people is probably a once-in-a-lifetime experience to actually have a proper tropical cyclone crossing this far south over the coast. So that in that respect, it's quite novel. We've had other events in the past, like East Coast lows, and even cyclones that have come in and crossed. They weakened before crossing. Mm-hmm. This one is going to be a fully fledged Category 2. Near the high end of the Category 2 scale. So the wind gusts, according to the Bureau, are going to be, on the southern side near the core, 155 kilometres an hour. And the Bureau are obviously watching. They said there's a low chance it might get to Category 3, but yep. They're adamant it'll continue to intensify until it crosses the coast. So this is the kind of thing you might expect if you lived in Cairns and Townsville, but for down in Brisbane, southeast Queensland, this is an incredibly rare event.
Yeah, so you wrote, you said it's a once-in-a-lifetime event, but you wrote in The Conversation that cyclones only form overseas that are warmer than 27 degrees, where evaporation rates are high. As the ocean temperatures continue to rise because of global warming, should we expect to see cyclones hit southeast Queensland or lower than the Tropic of Capricorn more?
Yeah, absolutely. There's already, first of all, just clarify the threshold temperature for maintaining a tropical cyclone. You can round it up, but it's 26.5. That's the magic number. And at the moment, off the coast of southeast Queensland, extending down off northern New South Wales, there's a tongue of warm water which it's now heading towards. Alfred is heading towards that, which is about 27. So it's above that threshold. It's not like it might be up north where you might get a Category 4 or 5, but it's still warm enough for it to intensify right through to landfall. So it is unusual for us to have sea surface temperatures that warm off the coast here. In fact, it's 1 to 1.5 degrees above normal.
You're right.
So
yeah.
that is a factor. Now, in the longer term, does it mean that we will expect to see more tropical cyclones in southeast Queensland? And the answer would be yes. It's already happening. There's already a trend in both hemispheres for tropical cyclones to be moving poleward.
Okay.
So we're already seeing that, and it's just that the other thing that is rare is for a cyclone to actually cross the coast down here. They normally get picked up and taken out into the Tasman Sea, where they go over cold water and break up. So
right, yeah, you call that the cyclone graveyard?
Yeah, that's the affectionate term used for where cyclones go to die. And sometimes they give our New Zealand friends a bit of a tickle up as a ex-cyclone over there. So, yeah, they are certainly important system over there, but this is unusual because it is coming back towards the west, and it's not likely to be picked up and taken away. So it's definitely coming, and we're going to know about it by tomorrow night.
Yeah. Do you know what will happen to skyscrapers in Brisbane? Up north, they don't have buildings quite as large as we do. So I'm not sure if they will be
equipped to handle.
Yeah, equipped to handle the high winds or.
Well, these are all very good questions. I'm obviously not a structural engineer, but if we get to Category 3 along the Gold Coast there, which is, that's more likely to be in the zone of these higher winds, more so than, say, north of Brisbane, they will be wobbling around, and no doubt they're designed to take some wind loading on them. They'd have to be by law. So, yeah, I mean, it is a risk if we get to Category 3. I imagine they probably perform quite well into Category 2 because they're quite new buildings and they would be have very strict regulations. I'd be more concerned about the canal estates around the Gold Coast,
right,
with storm surge, and some of the older places around Brisbane that were built maybe, before the cyclone code was tightened up in the 70s. So some of the older places built in the 20s and 40s, we could certainly lose some roofs in some areas. As I said, this is pretty well uncharted territory for Brisbane in particular, because we haven't seen this before.
No.
So cyclones are obviously a different weather system compared to things such as the 2011 and 2013, 2022 floods. How will it differentiate itself from those previous flooding experiences? What can we expect from that?
Well, I guess at this stage we're looking at it. The biggest threat is wind and storm surge. Particularly in areas that are exposed to that, so Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast to some extent, particularly Gold Coast. With Brisbane, you've got the protection of the offshore island, so Brisbane's quite lucky to have that. But some of the bayside suburbs, I think the Lord Mayor indicated there's about 20,000 properties in the Brisbane area that are at risk of storm surge, inundation, if the cyclone comes in through Moreton Bay, and they've been door knocking through those areas, warning people about it. So there is a risk even in the bayside suburbs. In terms of once it crosses the coast, well, that's when the flood risk comes, and historically we've had tropical cyclones cross the coast, mainly to the north of Brisbane, around Double Island Point, or even further north up into Hervey Bay, and that's what happened in 1974. A weak Category 1 cyclone crossed through there, stalled inland, and caused the 1974 Brisbane flood. So once it crosses the coast, the shift will go towards flash flooding and river flooding in areas to the south of the cyclone, or wherever it crosses the coast. So that will extend almost certainly down into northern New South Wales, that sort of northern rivers area, but also the hinterland of the Gold Coast as well.
Yeah, right. So you've said that the Alfred is a slow-moving cyclone compared to cyclones like Yazdi. Does this mean that Alfred will hang over southeast Queensland longer when it hits landfall, or will it dissipate quicker as soon as it hits landfall?
Yes, I guess in that article when I wrote it, it was actually meandering out there quite slowly, but it's now in quite a strong steering pattern. So that things have changed since when I wrote that article. So it's now tracking around 16 kilometres an hour. So that's not slow moving. It's moderately fast. So that's why they've got some idea that it's going to cross the coast probably early Friday morning or late Thursday night. However, sometimes when they cross the coast, that's when they tend to stall after they've crossed the coast because of the frictional effect of the land. And they'll be watching it to see if it does do that, and it sets up what's called a convergence zone for heavy rainfall, heavy to intense rainfall, which will be just to the south of the centre. And those are the areas that are likely to cop flooding as we get into the weekend. So, yes, it is moving reasonably fast at the moment.
Okay.
And that's because it's now in a strong steering pattern.
Right. You've wrote the book, the textbook, Surviving the Climate Crisis, Australian Perspectives and Solutions. At what point can weather events like this be attributed to global warming?
And that's another very good question. You guys have certainly done a lot of thinking about this. It'll be necessary, I guess, after this event for the climate science community to do what's called attribution studies. So they'll need to look at this event and then try and attribute how much of it is driven by background warming of the planet, the oceans and the atmosphere. So we at this stage we can't say that because that attribution work will need to take place. But we can say, though, that in a warming world we can expect these kinds of events to become more common in areas that don't normally receive tropical cyclones. So they'll still continue to be in places like North Queensland, Darwin, like that. But the idea is that we know they're already shifting south or shifting north in the northern hemisphere. So what we're witnessing at the moment, we have to see how it plays out. So, by Friday we'll have a good idea. And then attribution studies will look to see, they'll be able to say, well, this is a 2 to 3 times greater chance of happening because of background climate change. So that's when they do these attribution studies. And this could be an example of something that will be looked at. So at the moment we can't say it is due to climate change, but we can say it probably is, and that will need further research.
Yeah, okay. Well, talking about climate change, because I don't think we understand what will happen in the Australian context as much, even though we are probably going to be one of the most affected places. What are you worried about climate change will do to us here in Australia?
Yeah, well, that's a very long. I could talk about that all day, which is what I talk about in my book. I would actually say we do know a lot about what climate change will do to Australia. I wouldn't say I don't agree with you there.
I meant in a general everyday person.
Oh yes, well, everyday people. Yes, that's an issue when you have a media dominated by one area that doesn't like sharing this information with the public. So that's just me getting on my high horse about a certain media group. Reality is that we are a climate change hotspot globally, and we have probably the most to lose of many other wealthy countries in the world. Simply because of where we are. We're prone to droughts, we're prone to floods, bushfires. We've always had this highly variable climate, but now it's becoming increasingly more variable. So we really have a lot to lose for all of our economy, which includes growing our own food. Agriculture is vulnerable to climate change. Tourism is vulnerable. Our World Heritage sites like the Great Barrier Reef are vulnerable to climate change effects like coral bleaching. The list goes on, and we also have a lot of our population living near or on the coast. Yeah. And that's prone to sea level rise and storm surge, whether it's some cyclones or east coast lows. We've had these big flood events in recent years that you mentioned earlier. So we really have so much to lose that if we don't deal with climate change, it's going to cost our economy way more in the long run than not actually dealing with it now. So we need to work on bringing our emissions down. We need to make sure we get to net zero by 2050, and to do that as quickly as possible. We have bipartisan support for that in the Parliament. just the two main parties disagree about how they'll get there, but they both agree by 2050 we'll be at net zero emissions.
Mm-hmm.
We have to keep electrifying our energy network, bringing in renewables into our electricity network, also into our transport systems, moving away from using fossil fuels. So all of those sort of things are all really good things that we can do. But then, of course, it needs to be a global collective. All the world needs to come on board as well, because our emissions are very small, about 3% of all the world's emissions of greenhouse gases, but we've got the highest per capita or per person emissions, among the highest in the world, actually.
Yes.
We're higher than the US and we're higher than Canada. So over 15 tonnes of carbon per year per person. So we've got no excuses. Just because our total amount is low, our per person amount is actually very high.
Yeah. And you talked about the impacts being very variable, which I guess makes it hard to plan for. What is something that you think we should be planning for after cyclones, obviously?
Well, I guess, if this ends up being, worst case scenario, it does get to Category 3 and we do get some inundation in some parts of the Gold Coast, for example, or Brisbane, then we'll have to look about whether or not people should even be living in some of these areas. These are the kind of big questions that will have to be asked by authorities afterwards. We've already, people have already said, do we rebuild Lismore after it was flooded out? And how many times can you keep rebuilding a place before you suddenly decide to move it? So I think there'll be a lot of learnings from this system if it does turn out to be as bad as it possibly might be. And a lot of that will relate to building, particularly in these coastal low-lying areas or next to rivers.
Yep.
And we've had a lot of development over the decades in lots of low-lying areas of southeast Queensland, including lots of canal estates and also other residential estates. And I've always thought to myself, these are a bit of a sitting duck one day for a cyclone to come in.
Yeah, right.
So I guess this is going to be a bit of a test, isn't it, of how well they perform.
Yeah, well, hopefully everyone stays safe. Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us. How can people read more about your work?
Well, it's always worth going to the conversation. They can do that.
Yep.
And if you'd like to read it out again, they're welcome to have a look at my book. It's available at most libraries, or if they're keen, they can buy it themselves. Because I do focus on Australia, and I am focused on dealing with what are the impacts, but also what are the solutions.
Yeah.
So I'm not all negative in there. I try to say, well, these are things that we can do. These are things we can all do to combat climate change. So they're welcome to have a look at that. It is a textbook for uni students, but I think some people would be interested in having a read of it. Maybe just start with the local library to start with.
Yeah, I read through the preview that I was able to get my hands on. It's very, I don't want to say simplistic, but I was able to read it as someone who has not got a science degree at all.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
That's the whole point of the book. Is plenty of science books on climate change, but there aren't many books that are written for particularly students who perhaps are doing arts degrees or business or education. They're not necessarily in the science area, and you do need both, I think.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much for joining us, Steve.
You're both welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Okay. That was Professor Steve Turton. He's the Adjunct Professor of Environmental Geography at Central Queensland University. You're listening to 4ZZZ. This is Eco Radio.
A weekly dose of science on 4ZZZ is now available as a podcast.
I learned that you can hear the difference between different water temperatures when they're poured. I'm going to pour one after the other into a different glass, and you have to tell me which one is which temperature. I've got a hot and a cold. Right, here's the first one. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm saying cold.
It sounds cool. Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Here's the second one.
Well played.
Shut up.
Search No Idea 4ZZZ on your favourite podcasting app. That's spelled KNOW, like no idea. It's a visual pun on an audio platform. I don't know why we did it.
You're listening to Eco Radio, the radio of the future.
You are listening to Eco Radio, the radio of the future. Thank you, small child.
Bingo.
We've got it down pat
That's
now,
good,
Dave.
yeah. We're professionals. We just heard then from Boyfriend Material with their song Good For You, and then Peter Garrett with a new one from him called God On My Side. Peter Garrett's in a bit of hot water at the moment. Apparently at a concert, he said that everyone should be dancing like they're dancing on Gina Reinhardt's grave. Which she's not dead yet, but some commentators are getting up in arms about it, being like, "Oh, she's such a good lady.
Oh.
She does so much for everyone. She drills."
Yeah, I mean, when she gets buried, there's going to be another gender-neutral bathroom going around, so...
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
All for diversity is Gina Reinhardt.
Yeah, that's true. So I don't know whether we should do this for the coming weekend because there's probably not going to be a lot of things on.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of cancellations, but in the unlikely event that this tropical cyclone doesn't make landfall and doesn't cause any damage and doesn't create flooding and doesn't blow over those really tall skyscrapers on the Gold Coast.
Have you seen those videos of New York skyscrapers that just bend in the wind slightly with it?
No.
They freak me out.
Yeah.
They move it's up to a meter, backwards and forwards.
Yeah, right.
They're designed to flex, but I don't know if the Gold Coast skyscrapers were designed for that.
I hope so, because that's really effed.
Yeah.
I hope everyone is really safe and secure, and nothing bad happens to anybody. But in case things aren't cancelled this weekend, we'll let you know of things that you can do, or maybe you can just do some backyard bush care, plant some trees, getting ready for the rain.
Get rid of them.
It's a Bushcare Roundup. They've been pulling out weeds, and then they put in trees. It's the Bushcare Roundup.
Sorry for interrupting your song there for a second, Dave. We all deserve more time to hear your beautiful voice with a ukulele.
Yeah, the scrappy little song. Happening on Friday the 7th, possibly cancelled, is the at 4 o'clock at Kurilpa Common Farm Working Bee. That's at Kurilpa Commons in West End. And at 7 o'clock is Friday night cane toad catching. That's happening in Springfield Lakes Park, Springfield Lakes, possibly cancelled.
On Saturday the 8th, possibly cancelled. There's from 6 till 9 a.m. there's the Birdwatching walk at Anstead Bushland Reserve, Anstead. From 7 till 9, the Mookin-Bah Working Bee at 106 Greencamp Road, Wakerley.
Possibly cancelled.
At 8, we have the Dutton Park Common Farm Working Bee at Dutton Park Commons, possibly cancelled. Possibly cancelled from 8 till 10. There's a Come and Try Bushcare at Mason's Gully, and that one is John Street Reserve, Rosewood. From 8 till 10, there's the Come and Try Bushcare at Lorikeet Street Reserve, and that one's at Lorikeet Street Reserve, Bundamba, possibly cancelled. Possibly cancelled, 8 till 10. There's the Rome Street Bushcare at Rome Street, Norman Park, again, possibly cancelled. Possibly cancelled as well, from 8:30, is the March Bushcare Working Bee at Gertrude Petty Place, Mount Gravatt, and then see above all with the previous comments from 9 till 11, Bushcare at Moore Park, Indooroopilly, Russell Terrace.
And then on Sunday, which I'm going to say not possibly cancelled, because there might be a lot of cleaning up that needs to get done on Sunday. 6 to 9, Taringa Community Garden Working Bee. That's at Taringa Community Garden, Toowong. At 8 o'clock, there's Caring for Your Creek Working Bee. That's at Bullock Day Park Creek Care Site in Mount Crosby. And then at 11 o'clock on Sunday the 9th is the Forest Families Sundays. That's happening at Theka, which is at 47 Fleming Road, Chapel Hill. Possibly not cancelled yet. And then Wednesday, Success Street Bushcare at 7:30 in the morning. That's at the corner of Success Street and Beatty Road in Acacia Ridge. At 10 o'clock on Wednesday, you can go to the Bush Tucker Garden Tour. That's the University of Queensland Bush Tucker Garden in St. Lucia. So maybe those last two, possibly not cancelled.
There'll be some extra, I'm sure, like the Success Street Bushcare will need some extra hands after what will be occurring over the next couple of days.
Yeah, there's going to be some major cleaning up probably, but hopefully everyone is safe and secure and tied down, and they've got enough things to keep them occupied. Board games.
Get
and
some
such.
board games. Get Monopoly out for. No, that'll tear your family apart. Do you know what? Every time I think of cyclones or, I suppose, very windy events, I think of hurricanes. And do you know what that makes me think of, Dave? It makes me think of former WWF/WWE wrestler, The Hurricane. He's out there. His finishing move was Eye of the Storm. Yeah, just two things synonymous in my head now that really shouldn't be.
Yeah, right. The last thing, the thing I remember about cyclones, I was in Yeppoon years ago, and I was living on a property, a off-grid property, and living in this shed, and the owners said, there's a cyclone coming, category 5, you can't be in the shed anymore. So I waited out in a hostel, just outside Yeppoon, and that was the last cyclone I was in, so that's fun.
They were more common in central Queensland than I thought.
Yeah,
because my housemate's from Rockhampton, and she was telling me that they were still pretty common there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I lived in Cairns and Darwin as well. So, but did you know this? The most cyclones that make landfall are in China.
I didn't.
They have 6 cyclones a year on average.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that make landfall. So I never hear about it. So they've probably got really good infrastructure.
Yeah. Oh, who would have thought?
Not me.
Not me.
So let's go out with this track. This is Rain by Harold Holt Search Party. Hopefully I know. It's almost perfect. So hopefully that there are no search parties and everyone's safe. But you've been listening to Eco Radio on 4ZZZ. I'm Dave.
I'm Zack.
And tune into 4ZZZ all day, every day. We're still going to be broadcasting. Stay safe out there.
Toodles.